Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Mortgage Tech Talks. This one is one I've wanted to do for a while. It's with Geoff Willis at Velocity. We cover a whole bunch of stuff, starting with his journey from being a broker, making the leap into a fintech platform, and that kind of decision process, that part of the journey. What really was the big driver of their success so far, and what, looking forward, he sees as the next big drivers of success. We talk about how he thinks about new products and how he prioritizes different things. And we kind of wrap up talking about velocity versus blue. It's something that a lot of our clients, listeners ask us about, saying what's the big difference? And it's a very honest, transparent conversation that really dives into that. So if any of that sounds interesting, which if you're in the industry, I hope it does, feel free to join us. We'll see you on the other side. Truth maybe is that every time you put a document in an email, that is the most vulnerable place. Hey, Geoff, how are you?
I'm good, Tom. How are you today?
No complaints, no complaints. Let's get right into it here. So I know ahead of this, I sent you a little survey, and it's a bit of a generic survey, but I didn't realize how much time you actually spent on the brokering lending side. My relationship with you has always been on the tech side.
Yeah.
A lot of conversations we have on this podcast is making that transition. A lot of brokers, they start brokering, they build a cool kind of tech thing for their business, and then they say, hey, I think other brokers might like this. But then that jump from brokering to running a full-scale tech business, that's a big jump sometimes. So curious about that kind of journey and how you thought through that and how you made that leap. Love to hear a bit about that.
Sure. Well, I've been around mortgage origination business probably since 89. So
Okay,
right
sure.
out of elementary
You can
school.
do the math. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Spent a little bit of time on the broker side as well as on the bank Salesforce side. And it always
okay.
struck me funny that we had these high paid commission salespeople doing a ton of data entry.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
and if they got really busy, they spent most of their time out during the business day getting new business, and then spent their evenings, often late into the evening, entering all the data into a system to get it into the bank's underwriting platform. And I thought, why are they doing a lot of $12 or $10 an hour work,
Yeah.
depending on the time frame you're talking about, to do that? So I've always kind of been engaged around this concept of process improvement and who should do what part of the job and the work. And then Y2K kind of happened, and it was like, well, why don't we take the laptops away from all the salespeople and just centralize, data entry and sort of operations center? And that was kind of considered, a sacrilegious kind of idea at the time to do that, because everybody was just developing, having their own laptops and computers and so forth. So my second go around in brokerage, when I left TD Canada Trust and I worked in their mortgage sales force nationally and ran their builder business, is I thought, okay, I want to build a brokerage that has technology so that everybody doesn't have to build their own process, hire their own assistant. And we kind of had a common way of, this is how we do it here. So when we started our brokerage, which was called Origin Mortgages here in Vancouver.
And that's still running too, right?
It's still running. Kyle bought it from
Yeah.
us in 2022 and is still going today. He's done a great job of maintaining and growing it. And we really wanted somebody of Kyle's background and age, someone with lots of runway in front of them to really take care of those people long term. And he's done a great job. Good. So we started Origin in 2005. We said, well, let's start with having a database structure, a system. It just started with basic, deal states and reminders so that nobody was going to get that phone call at closing from the lawyer going, where's my instruction? You're going, what instructions? Like you forgot about the deal. So it was really taking what used to be people's file folders and Post-it notes and putting it into a database structure. And then it began to grow from there. And we were like, as you just described, those guys that said, this might be good for brokerages outside of Origin. So through lots of convincing and cajoling and trying to twist arms, I finally found some partners in Gary and Chris at DLC who had been growing a fairly significant distribution group and said, I think if we did this right, we could take on the incumbent Filogix and really do something in this technology business. Mm-hmm. So we spent a lot of time pushing string uphill and trying to sell what was then a product called Auto to convince people to come off expert and to do their business. But it didn't have any place to go. It didn't have any connection other than pushing the deal to expert to in turn push it to the lenders. At which point a lot of customers go, well, that seems an extra step. So we didn't really move the needle until such time as together we had an opportunity to purchase Marlborough Sterling, which had been a fledgling UK-based company trying to compete with Filogix here in Canada.
Yep.
So we're able to buy that. It did have some connections to some major lenders. We obviously had to upgrade those, rebuild them. And then there was a time frame there where I had both Origin as a business. We still had an insurance agency. We were doing some PNC sort of insurance work through a company called Insureline. And we had
Yes, I know Insureline.
what became Newton, which
Yep.
owned the Velocity product.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
there was that kind of a 5-year period there where I had all of those things going on before
A
Kyle
lot of
took over
different hats,
Origin.
eh?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. And so maybe on that last point there, you're wearing a lot of different hats, it seems, at a given time. And again, in that scenario that I described, where a broker is doing, hey, I do my brokering, but this cool tech platform that I'm thinking of, tend to wear two different hats. And I think that's the right thing, especially when you're just getting something off the ground. You kind of need to wear those two hats, whether it's to fill your day or to keep your bank account afloat or whatever it is. When did you know that you couldn't be wearing those other hats, right? Or was
Yeah.
there a single moment? And was that decision tough? Like, was it like, oh, I still really love brokering. I have great clients. In order to take off that hat, what was that thought process, and
Yeah, I
how'd you
love being with
rationalize it?
salespeople. I mean, anybody who tells you I'm by nature a frustrated salesperson. I mean, I think we're all in sales in some capacity, regardless of our role, right? So
Yes, all life
I
sales,
liked
yeah, sales,
that
yeah,
energy of being around that. And I had a lot of years of really feeling that gratifying expression of being able to phone a client and tell them we're getting them into their home, right? That's a great thing to be around as a business. A lot of people don't get that. To get that every week or every day, that's a pretty good way to finish a workday.
yeah.
So I kind of liked being around it, but I knew that I wasn't serving the people at Origin as I
Mm.
used to with this other business that I
Do
knew
you
that
think
was
they
larger.
noticed too? Some of the folks at
Oh, for
Origin
sure.
started
Oh, for
saying,
sure.
"Yeah,
Absolutely.
interesting."
And, we brought in various people to help us. Like we had Tiffany Peterson, who you may know from Strive. She spent time as a
Yes, I
general
know her
manager
actually.
with us. She
Yes,
put her arms around everybody. People love Tiffany. We did some things to try to shore that up, but, it's just different for
yeah,
people. Now, I think the brokers that worked at Origin felt like they got the first look at everything new that was
sure,
technology based. And they
yeah,
felt
yeah,
that that was a bit of a competitive advantage for them. So I think they were okay with it. But at some point, you just go, okay, I got to,
right,
fish or cut bait here. Like, so we knew it was time. So it took us some time to find the right person. And, truth be told, I mean, even though we owned it since 2017, it took us probably till 2020 before things really started to take off for Velocity. And
yes,
to a large extent, that TSN Turning Point was when Filogix had a 5-day outage, right?
that's
I mean,
crazy, eh?
it took
Yeah,
pain. It took real
yeah,
pain for people to finally make the leap. So I'd like to say we did everything right and we were so smart and built the best tech and everyone came to the best tech. But it took them having real pain. Both the lenders going, holy smokes, like we can't get any deals,
yeah.
right? And
Pardon me. Yeah,
yeah. So it's kind of like, being that only fishing boat when there's been a hurricane and you're the one that's still got the
like
fishing
Forrest
nets.
Gump, right?
Yeah, the Forrest Gump story.
Yeah,
Exactly.
you guys are Forrest Gump in 22. That's
Yeah.
it. No, that's funny. And I think that, yeah, necessity, I think you put it as, sometimes the biggest driver of change. My working theory, I haven't fully fleshed this out, is necessity might be the only real driver of change. I don't know if that's true or not, but
Oh, I use that phrase all the time. It's the
yeah,
mother of all inventions, right?
sure. Yeah, that's just it, I guess, right? And there's that, but then I think there's also, for you, to give you some credit, it's also the Bill Gates quote where it's like luck, quote unquote, is when preparation meets opportunity, right? So being prepared for when that opportunity presents itself. So,
Yeah, I think that's a big part of
yeah.
it. We showed up every day from
Yes.
2017 to
Right.
2020, pushing string uphill and just kept persevering. And
Yeah.
people always ask me that question. I do all these things now that I'm getting a little longer in my career. What would you say is your sort of superpower? And that is that I just outwork the other guy. I
Yeah.
just keep showing up, keep answering your phone, and do not run out of gas.
Yeah. I love it. Was there ever a moment of doubt in that, from that, let's call it
Actually,
2016?
no. Surprisingly, no. I
Okay.
just felt that
Yeah.
once we got the distribution part of this nailed, and Gary and Chris are very bright at recognizing that once you create scale through distribution,
Mm,
opportunities that you didn't anticipate will present themselves to you. So I
right.
knew once that relationship was forged and we did the right work to connect to lenders to upgrade these various schemas that Marlboro Sterling had, and just knowing that Filogix wasn't in that time frame taking the opportunity to improve their current
Mm,
platform,
yes. Yeah.
I just thought it was just keep showing up, keep doing
It's
the
a
right
matter of time.
things.
Yeah.
Yeah, think like a customer and it'll
Sure.
work. Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting. No, it's great that you have that conviction, because I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs have those moments of self-doubt where it's like, oh, we have this great thing, but is it actually going to be what we think it's going to be? So having the right partners help with that. And maybe we could shift there for a second. So obviously, you said Gary and Chris were a big part of, making Velocity what it is, and, gave you that conviction. This is, I think, a question a lot of our listeners have is, how do you position yourself relative to that DLC group now? I mean, obviously there's ownership involved and you can speak to that, but, do you see yourself as just a service provider for the DLC brokers, or do you see yourself more as a, completely standalone tech company that just so happens to be part of, this ownership group? How do you kind of think through that? And what would you want kind of the market to know, I guess, anyone listening?
Yeah, I think there's a difference in how I see ourselves and how the
Or
market
maybe
would see
option C.
ourselves,
Okay,
right?
yes.
So,
Okay, yeah.
I would say that today we're kind of a challenger to
Okay.
the likes of the incumbent. And I'd like to see that change based on the fact that I just believe in my bones that I've got a better way of doing business for all brokers and agents, regardless of the flag they fly. I think we've built a lot of technology that supports anybody who says this is the right thing for me and my customers in terms of how I'm going to serve them using tech. The tech feels invisible when I use
Yeah,
Velocity and their
I
client
like that.
experience and my
Yeah.
document portal and all these pieces that the others just don't have, and they don't do it, with any sort of scale. So I think that will begin to ring true for more and more people flying other flags beyond DLC.
Hmm.
But, it's kind of a small business here in Canada,
Yeah.
and people
Yeah.
kind of let their egos get in the way, or who owns something in the way. And I don't think that happens generally at the agent level, but it does at the owner level,
Yes,
at the
for
network
sure.
level. And
Hmm.
so, I think what you do is just keep enhancing, keep building the better mousetrap, and just keep
Yep.
showing up, and little by little you get more of that other customer group. We're probably somewhere around 12 to 15% of our volume today is non-DLC
Oh,
group.
really? Yeah.
We
Okay.
intend to have that grow significantly in the next year. We think some of the recent enhancements we've made to show both owners and agents how we support them with this new regulatory
Yeah,
framework
the
with
AML.
AML is going to draw more
Yeah.
people.
Hmm.
We think that some of our all-in-one functionality will draw more people as we look at these great opportunities coming with this tidal wave of renewals.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I
I
think
think.
there's a
Yeah.
lot of people that are just,
Okay.
they're ready to level up from expert. I mean, that is who we transfer basically, is that's our biggest customer, is the one who's been on a 10-year or 15-year platform that, they just go, okay, I can't do this anymore. I got to do something better.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know the numbers you get, but the numbers I hear, not from a volume, but from a pure agent perspective, it's still like 60, 70% on expert.
The number in head count's probably 70 and the volume's probably 65,
Yes. Right. Yeah.
right? Something
So,
like that.
yeah, some of the more high volume people are the ones quicker to switch because they
Yeah,
understand the
we
game.
have a lot of
It's
really,
yeah.
really top producers, like we've got somewhere in the neighborhood around 9,000 customers. And I
Okay.
would say that your top 2,000 are probably doing 55% of all the
Yeah.
throughput,
Okay.
which is probably
Yes.
indicative. If you looked at all the networks, those numbers probably shake out the same
Yes.
way by each brand.
Yep.
So it's not dissimilar, but we do have a lot of top players, because top players are always looking to
Yeah.
refine and improve how they do things.
Well, yeah, exactly. And if you're doing, that's just easy numbers, right? One deal a month versus 10 deals a month, if you do a shift in, maybe it's technology or whatever the shift is in your process, you're going to get 10 times the benefit if you're doing 10 times the volume, right? So I think the
Correct.
ROI calculation makes sense for those people too. So, maybe if I could phrase it, you're almost kind of in that 2018, 2019 moment again, but maybe just at a different level where, okay, you had that 2020, you got a ton of adoption. Now you're in that challenger, firmly entrenched in that challenger. And now you're looking for the next, maybe quote unquote, necessity to hit brokers that will force them to really start looking at, other solutions, like Velocity. If you had to look forward for the next, I don't know, 1, 2, 5 years, what do you think that next big necessity is going to be? Is it going to be these new regulations? You talked about AML, and that's been, something very top of mind for a lot of people. Is it going to be the AI wave that everyone seems to not be able to stop talking about? If you had your crystal ball, I won't hold you to it. What do you
Yeah,
really
I
see
don't
as
know
that
that
next
it's one
necessity?
silver
Yeah.
bullet, Tom.
Yeah.
I think it's probably a few things that strung together
Mm.
create a greater wedge between incumbents and the other group. So for us, I'm a big believer that We operated where the technology was really incumbent on just transferring data elements, data records, right?
Yep.
Electronically. But interestingly enough, this business, where the rubber hits the road in this business, is the documents that come from the client and from the
Yes.
realtor about the property and the applicants that support what's in that application that's been uploaded.
Yes.
And often there's a variance between what somebody states and then what somebody's able to prove.
Prove. Yeah.
So we've extended what we do in terms of our connections to our key lenders to include the documents.
Very cool.
And that's
Okay.
a precursor to then reading the documents, comparing them to the data elements in the application, say, do these things match? And if they don't, what's the ramifications to that differential?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
So we think that that is a little bit of a variable that I think is going to change, because as we see this volume of business, the double cohort and the renewals that are coming up, I
Yes.
mean, your
Yeah.
ability to be efficient is going to be more and more important for good brokers. So having documents as part of the same payload, not having to go to
Yes.
individual lender portals,
Upload it.
connecting it to the
Back
data
and forth.
record,
Yeah.
putting forward the variant and the lender seeing it, I think is going to help. And we've kind of coined this phrase that we see it as being kind of a verified application, where we verified
Sure.
the credit and the property and the down payment and the income. So now that the lender knows, this is not going to be something I'm looking at 5, 6, 7 times over the next couple of weeks.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
I think it's kind of like having you got the 401 in Toronto, but you also got the 407. So we want to put a lot more deals on the 407 to get to
Yes.
the lender fully complete. So
Yeah.
I think that's part of it. And I think AI will play a role
Sure.
in the development of accelerating how we can deliver that kind of solution.
Got it. Yes. Right. And for the non-Torontonians, 401 is basically a parking lot, and
That's
the
right.
407 is the express where you fly about 140 down the highway to get there, right?
It's the Autobahn versus, as you said,
yeah,
a parking lot.
that's it. That's it. That's interesting. And I know the direct transfer, I think, is really great technology. But I also see it's something you guys are really advertising. Every time you log into Velocity, it kind of pops up, hey, RMG, or the next person has this
Right.
direct thing. And so it seems obviously to be a big part of your strategy. I took it, and this might be wrong, that it was more of like a security and compliance, because, hey, there's a lot of maybe, if people are exchanging things back and forth over email, there's vulnerabilities there. But based on what you said, it's more, maybe on the lender side of things, or is it for you, on the broker side of things? Because one of the big things I try to decipher is, there's all these different parties. There's the borrower, there's the broker owner, there's the lender. And what are you optimizing your technology for, right? And maybe that's the question for you. How do you guys think about it? Are you really optimizing for maybe the borrower, a great borrower experience? Or are you optimizing for the lender so that they can get this, verified application? Or is it a little bit all of the above? How do you prioritize across all these different parties that might be
That's
involved
a
in
real good
Velocity?
question. And you sound like
Yeah.
a guy who's in the industry and knows. So that's a really good one. I don't get that one often.
Well, I
Yeah.
am. So yeah. Anyway,
Yeah.
yeah. Sure.
So in your other job,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. That's it.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I would say this to you, and the best way to lay this out is an example. I think we did a really good job of building what we would call a client experience that incorporated giving customers a sense of comfort that their most sensitive, most personal documents that they're sharing with their mortgage broker were coming in securely,
Yep.
but was also simple enough that if I had to take a picture of my pay stub or something else, it was converting it. It was behind our firewall. It was encrypted in the data transfer process. And I felt good about it. And I owned that technology, right? What was facing the customer and what was facing the broker, we own. But I don't own what happens to the lender. So sometimes some of those guys and ladies would have to turn around and take that application and send it to somebody through their Gmail account to get the deal underwritten.
Exactly.
And it was just
right.
like, okay, that's
Yeah.
nuts.
Yeah.
So we thought we got to move this all the way down the value chain. So we have said to lenders, who are our customers in a very big way,
Yes.
this makes sense for you. If you get more deals up front and we can actually put a little flag on it and saying this deal is called verified, it's in your interest, because the killer in an underwriting center is the revisits of the same file, to go back and to go back and go back. And we've created an industry where you can get an approval subject to the world. And,
Yes. Yeah.
so I send in your app, I send in your
Yeah.
credit bureau, I say, hey, Tom, you told me you're going to make $200,000. I'll get that information next week when you get your hands on it, or your accountant sends it to me. But you may go out and put yourself in a firm and binding contract or make some decisions based on the approval I gave you, but it's subject to you giving me all those things to support it. So we wanted to kind of move that to the front end and make that part of the lender's equation. Now, lenders don't move as quick as we would move. So we have to work through their processes, their budgeting, their technology, their priorities, and to do it. So it really works when it becomes ubiquitous for the broker, and that, hey, I can send this to every lender this way, document transfer right from the Velocity dashboard. So that's what we're working to make happen. And I'm pretty confident that before the end of this next calendar year, it'll be the new standard. And I don't think my competitors can do that in that time frame.
No, I think that's a huge lift. And like you said, the biggest lift of it all, not that I really work with the lenders specifically, but what I hear is just that piece of it, right? They have their steering committees and they're this and they're that. And to push these types of, initiatives through, I used to work with big companies down in the US and it would be tough.
We have every one of our top 10 lenders. And just to give you some perspective, the top 5 lenders suck down about 70% of all the submission activity. So we got all top 10 in projects in flight for direct documents transfer now. So I think we've got 5 that have landed and 5 that are kind of in process, with 3 of them, what I would call a more advanced state, meaning that'll be a deliverable in the next, probably trimester, 4 months.
Well, I want to dig into this a little bit more, Geoff, before we go to the next topic. I wanted to dig into, you said next year, this is going to be the standard. Like, whose standard, I guess? Is that the regulator, you think? Or is that going to be each lender is going to start building this in? Or is it going to be, the broker owner saying, I don't want compliance liability? Who's defining or who's implementing?
I think everybody. I think that the lenders will want it for efficiency and underwriting. Broker owners want it because more and more frequently they're hearing from their provincial regulators that we want you to have more oversight, and oversight means here's how we do it here. Here's where the documents are. Here's where the communications are. Here's where, the various compliance documents that need to be completed between broker and customer are stored. So I think there's something there for them. And I think, quite honestly, for the agents, there's a lot in it too, because if you do the good work in getting things up front and you get a new highway to have a different customer experience, give a more firm approval faster. And do it securely, why wouldn't you do it? Right. So, we've got a sort of a hashtag called skip the portal. Like, why would I go to 11 different portals for lenders if I can send it direct? We're basically acting as the single sign-on for each and one of those portals and placing in the right order. Right. That's really our role.
Well, it's simplicity for the agent in that, I don't have to have 10 tabs and 10 different things open and 10 log and all those things. Right. Of course, that's a big part of it. But I think actually, the more interesting and nuanced point, which is probably hard to get across, I think, is what you said, which is you're getting more firm approvals, right? I mean, I think the pain for a lot of the brokers, for sure, any agent always is the documents, is always the conditions on the approval, that if you going to Velocity can get approval back with 2 conditions versus whatever other platform out there, and I consistently getting 5, 6, 7 conditions over enough time, that really adds up operationally. That's huge. So
an interesting extension to that conversation, you kind of touched on it before about AI, and it's maybe AI, but it's maybe not. It's really document reading. If you think about
OCR, sure.
Well, OCR is kind of still old school, but are considered old school now. But they're actually reading the whole document. Microsoft putting a ton of money into it. OpenAI is putting a lot of money into it. But the idea is that if I send in your job letter, it was still a standard practice for an underwriter to call that employer to confirm your employment. So the question I ask lenders is, if I give you the job letter and I give you the bank account statements for the last 90 days, and you show direct deposits biweekly from that employer into that account, and I highlight them for you, are you going to need to still
match them up?
And match them up. And they're going, no, we don't. And I said, okay, there's a win. So those are the things that we're trying to do by incorporating the document into the payload.
Very interesting. And that's exactly, I think, what you said earlier. That's not a silver bullet, right? That's not going to be it. But that's a death by 1,000 cuts. And that's just one of the cuts, right? And that's all the things that, very
Then that's business.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Well, there you go. Well, as much as that would be a good punchline to close things out on, I wanted to maybe drill into one more thing with you, just one other topic. And I think it touches on this death by 1,000 cuts, that we're talking about, is the all-in-one platform. And you touched on it earlier, for Blue. So in my other job, as you put it, I run Blue Mortgage, which is CRM. We do just CRM, right? That's just us. That's what we do.
Yeah.
And obviously for you guys, you touch CRM, but you touch a bunch of other things too. So Talk to me, I guess, a little bit about that decision. And, I'm happy to kind of, I think, for you, you probably know where we stand, and I think we know where you stand. But I guess maybe just for the audience, how did you think about that, having that all in one package? Was that always the vision for you guys? How did you think
No,
about that?
no, I think
No. Okay.
it's like you start by renovating your house and you think, I'm just going to do the kitchen.
Okay.
And then all of a
Yeah. Yeah.
sudden your wife goes, well, you know what? That bathroom next to the kitchen probably needs a bit of work. And then all of a sudden, well, we're there anyway. Why don't we rip out that front room? And like,
And then you rip up the floorboards and there's mold and you're doing,
yeah,
yeah. Yeah.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So there's
Yeah.
definitely an element of a reno creep that goes on sometimes when you're building a platform.
Yep.
And I think if you try to build things from the outside in, meaning you listen to your customers and they tell you what they need,
Mm-hmm.
what I think becomes fundamentally problematic for people that have built a myriad of systems to support what they had beyond a submission engine, which is what
Yes.
Expert was for years.
Yeah.
They found that as they got busy, some pieces would fall apart because they couldn't keep
Yeah.
up manually to
Yes.
maintain them. So we thought, okay, let's make some of the secret sauce, this notion that these things are integrated and work together.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you know this personally because we work together. We support the concept of open architecture. Like we've got a
For
lot
sure
of
you do.
customers that were
Absolutely.
blue customers
Yeah.
first, velocity
Yep.
customers second. I don't want to convince them to change horses for their CRM. I'd rather say, how do I make it easier for you to populate something that's already working for you and populate your submission platform, which is a key element to doing business in this vertical. So, I'm quite happy to support all that. I mean, I will tell you this, every week, somebody's got a new tech idea
Yes.
and they want to integrate with Velocity. And,
Sure.
we may come to a time where we do kind of like our own app store where,
Sure.
like
Very
fill your
cool.
boots. Like this
Yeah.
is kind of what we
Okay.
do. It's, back and forth because you can't be all things to all people all the time. So we have to make a decision on
Mm.
here's what we don't do, right?
Mm-hmm.
We ventured into CRM because we knew that that was an element where a lot of people found that manually they weren't keeping things up with
Yeah.
a lot of systems, not yours, but others.
You can say ours. I won't take it personally. I'll take it.
But we needed to figure a way to have sort of
Yeah.
a circular communication relationship. So, do I think it's easier for people to have an all-in-one? I do, just because people being people, their core business is doing mortgages.
Yep.
But I'm completely supportive of having someone say, I want to do it this way for this part of my business. Great. How can
Sure.
we help you? How can we
Yeah.
do that?
No, that's interesting. And I think, my take on it for what it's worth is, there was, kind of one system for a long time, just that expert submission engine.
Yeah.
And then I think in, I don't know, 2020-ish, people started becoming open. So, you guys had the open AP architecture, some of the competitors did. Competitors came to compete against Filogics. So Filogics was forced to become a little bit more open. And then there was this big explosion, right? There was, 100 different apps for 100 different tasks, and everyone's trying to connect.
Yeah.
And where I think we're at right now is people are getting exhausted of that 100 different things. And it's like the portals we were talking about earlier, but now it's just 100 different tech tools, 100 different logins that I need to keep up with. And so I think we're kind of, regressing back to the mean. I think we're going to settle in, this is me personally, that range of you're going to have on one hand, this is how many systems you need to run your whole business. But I think we're overcorrecting back to now, hey, closer to that all in one. But one thing I wanted to ask you about is, so where do you draw that line? I guess you said, okay, we have to be very clear on what we do and what we don't do. What would you say is, some of those places where you're saying we do not do this? Is it hard to make those calls, especially when, customers are asking for it, right?
Yeah.
Hey, could you just be,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Hey, listen, the
Yeah.
guy who's got the biggest hearing aid in our whole company is Kevin Deere. Kev's our
Okay.
broker facing VP
Sure.
of broker
Yeah.
experience. So I
Yeah.
always got to remind him to turn the volume down on that hearing aid, but Kevin, to his credit, works with our tech team and basically is the voice of our customer inside. So
Yeah.
I think we've got a pretty good format for sorting out what we're going to do and what we're not going to do. I mean, we start with, okay, is this serving one person or 1,000 people?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm being overly simplistic, but
Sure.
people come to us with ideas because they made it up manually because it served them and they think we should have it now and every, because they do a lot of volume. I get that, but so that's part of it. What can we leverage that's scalable?
Mm-hmm.
What looks like something else that we could come to the market with an MVP that we got to continue to enhance and upgrade.
Mm-hmm.
So
Sure.
as an example, we made a decision a long time ago that we weren't going to be in the business of selling lender selection. We weren't going to be in the business of running a search engine for
Yes.
lenders'
Okay.
products and policies
Got
and
it.
rates and so
Yes.
forth. We
Yeah.
thought it was too outside of what our mandate was.
Sure.
So,
Okay.
that
Yeah.
there's other people that have filled that spot, and we've
Yep.
chosen to do something in it, but we haven't done it to the extent that others have. And as a
Right.
result, I think that that was a strategic decision. There was a lot of pressure on me to do that kind of a product,
Yes.
and
Sure.
I didn't want to do it, right, for a lot of obvious reasons. So there's an example, but
Yeah.
I hope that answers your question or helps
It
you
does. It
keep
does. I
kind of
mean, I
thinking.
think, from the outside looking in, it's always like, hey, velocity. And I think it's great. We see all the features you're coming out. And every time you come with a new feature, it's always really well put together. But, I think what people don't see is the behind the scenes, all the things that you said no to, right? And, how do you draw that line? And, I think an important thing is what you just talked on, which is, what is your vision? What is your strategic mandate? Because that's what drives, those types of decisions. So,
Yeah.
I think,
Yeah,
I
I
think
mean,
that's,
I
yeah.
think thinking like the customer, like, I mean, I did not want to do AML. Like when we first read it, it was
Okay.
just, okay,
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
is ID verification. I don't want to be in this. This is not, we'll just outsource. We'll get it,
hmm
we don't need that. And then when you pull that, you take the layer off the onion, you start reading this, you go, holy moly, these people are being deputized
Yes.
to
Yeah.
do a lot of things that you can incorporate into their process if you do it elegantly and you build it and you don't try to go to for-profit aggregators. So that's the choice that we made.
Sure. Yeah.
And I think as a result, we have the most fulsome solution for both the agent and the broker owner, who's ultimately the one responsible
Yeah.
to the regulator and gives them some oversight on how people are behaving within their system.
hmm
And we do it without having to lay off a bunch of costs because we use somebody else's tech. So
Yeah.
we're pretty pleased about that. And the reaction so far has been pretty good.
Right. No, that's interesting. And I think that coming back to thinking like a customer is definitely a huge part of that. One thing maybe we can leave on, I think, one thing with these AMLs, Jeff, and this is more my opinion too, and I'd love to get yours, is, my sense with it is that it's just another regulation. It's just another thing. And it's, these
Yeah.
things keep adding up. And inevitably, my take is that with more regulation comes more consolidation. Let's talk about maybe at the broker owner level, but maybe even the tech level, and that, that smaller, let's say, mom and pop broker owner can't keep up as maybe they could. And so now there's a bit more incentive to say, okay, well, let's merge in with this bigger group. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing yet. I don't know yet. I'm usually a fan of independence, but there's also, economies of scale that can do a lot of good things. And so, do you think that's true? My take on that, which is, hey, more regulation might lead to that consolidation. And is that a good thing or a bad thing? What's your kind of take on
Yeah.
that?
I think this notion of independence or lack thereof is kind of a misnomer. I mean, it
Okay.
comes down to one basic thing. You're either paying somebody for something or you're not, right? I
Okay.
think on a day to
Yeah.
day, whether you're part of a network that has a franchise system or
Yep.
a individual office system, like whatever you're part of a system, there's some version of here's our culture, here's how we do it here.
hmm
But it's not so encroaching that you don't get to figure out how you're running your business in the day
Yeah.
in, day out,
Sure.
right? I just
Yeah.
don't see that in our business
hmm
anywhere.
Sure. Fair enough.
But I think it comes down to one basic thing. Can I do all the things that I need to do to run my business successfully and bear the brunt of the expense to do that? Or am I smarter to pay other parties as a variable expense for having those services provided to me? And it just becomes math. And
Okay.
I think to a large extent, brokers become brokerage owners because they have a desire to give back. They want to mentor other people. They think that it's a better business. They want to build a business beyond just them originating some mortgages.
Yep.
But you can only be good at so many different things.
Yeah.
So
Sure.
you have to decide what those things are going to be and let other people support you to do the other parts. And
hmm
that's why I think a lot of people are attracted to networks. It's like, well, they're going to make you do this and they're going to make you do that. My experience has been there is a semblance of order, and certainly regulations and regulatory frameworks create more order around that.
Yep. Sure.
But I think this industry still has tremendous freedom for
Yeah.
day to day, minute to minute behavior with a customer, with a lender. I don't see that changing in the near term because it works really well.
I think that's exactly right. In that there is quite a bit of freedom still, I think, in this industry. I compare it to, we did a little bit of work in the insurance PNC world. Well, you talked about, a bit of work you did with InsureLine, right? And
Yeah.
I see that side of thing, that broker agent model, there's quite a bit more restriction in that, at least brokerages we worked with, the individual agents were kind of like half employees of that brokerage. See, and we're not anywhere close to that. My thinking is I don't ever want to get there in this industry. I think that's what it is, but I think we're still far way off. And, that's exactly right. I think you got to find your core competencies and play to those. I think whether you're a broker owner or you're a tech company, whatever, that's the key to success. So
Yeah, that's why we ventured into AML, why we ventured into CRM, why we ventured into documents, because we thought this is something that can serve 10,000. It's not
right.
for 10 people or 20 people. So when people pitch me, hey, you should incorporate this tech, I said, okay, tell me how many customers. What do you think your customer base is? And
Yeah.
what's the revenue model going to look like? And if they give me a number that I think there's no way that number of people are going to buy this as a solution and pay for it,
Mm-hmm.
then I go, best of luck, and I'm happy to find a way to incorporate it.
It's just math at that point. Is there a business case?
Yeah.
Will the revenues outweigh the cost? Right.
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
being unemotional about it. I mean, that's a big part of it too, right? So that's probably the hardest part of it all, right?
It is.
Is to not be emotional about it.
You
So
move into being in love with your own product, right? And
yeah.
the thing I always try to remind people of is, you are not going to be your only customer. If you were, then like, why are you talking to me about it, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
You have to figure out who's going to use this and how many people will think like you're thinking, right? And that's what I think a lot of people is they're trying to solve a problem for them and their one friend, and they go, oh well, I'm not sure that works. And I think I'd go back to what I told you at the beginning about distribution, like really understand what you need in distribution to make your product work. Otherwise, a good idea is just that. It's a good idea that you'll put in a filing cabinet and go, wow, I should have done more with that. Because I've had people come to me and say, I started doing what you did.
Yeah.
And I kind of stopped.
So have we, right? Yeah.
Yeah. You probably run into this all the time.
Yeah. Dozens of times.
Sure.
Yeah. There's no shortage of good ideas, right? There's no shortage of good ideas. It's
exactly.
the execution and the distribution. Man. You got it. Listen, Geoff, this was awesome. Flew by. I learned more than I thought I would from this convo. I learned a bunch.
Oh, I'm glad to hear
that. This was fun. We should do it again, but thanks so much. I guess any kind of final words for the listeners from your end, Geoff?
Yeah, I think this is a great time to be in this business. I know that it's been a tougher year for people, and a lot of that has to do with externalities, things that you don't control. Like there's not a lot of homes to find to buy. And if you can find them, they're really, really expensive, and people have a hard time qualifying for them. I do think stars are aligning in our favor to an extent. And like everything, there are cycles. It's a harder cycle because the first time ever, we have such a divide between the values of the properties that are out there and what people can qualify for in earnings. And that's something that needs to get figured out. And I think it will, but I think it's going to take us some time to figure it out. So I always say to people to encourage the people they interact with, be an owner, not a loaner. Like get into the real estate market. It won't be the home you want long-term, but get in. And I think brokers and realtors got to work together to sell that dream of home ownership again harder to younger people and make it feel more achievable. And I think we got to do it.
People are giving up. A lot of my friends say, oh, I'll just never own a home. Right.
Yeah. Don't give up. No, like there is a way. There is a way. There's a lot of good fundamentals that are working in our favor, but you just got to decide. And if you decide attitude wise, you're at least half the way through.
Absolutely. Love it. Well, listen, Geoff, thanks again. And we'll chat soon. Yeah.
Okay. Take care.